Tyler Reed pulled off his work gloves and tossed them onto the metal workbench. His fingers ached from 10 straight hours of repairs, but that was normal for a Tuesday on Vortex Station. The alien freighter in Bay 3 finally hummed to life, its engines purring smoothly after he'd replaced the damaged coolant lines. Another satisfied customer, another day's work done. 15 years. That's how long Tyler had been running his repair shop in the industrial quarter of the station. 15 years of learning how to communicate with bug-eyed traders who spoke in clicks, reptilian haulers who measured time differently than humans, and floating jellyfish-like beings who couldn't even breathe the same air he did. The galactic community was strange, sometimes frustrating, but Tyler had found his place in it. His shop was small, nothing fancy, just 3 repair bays and a cramped office, but he'd built something real here. Word got around. When you did good work and charged fair prices, species didn't care that you were human. He grabbed a rag and started wiping down his tools. The station's artificial lights were dimming to evening cycle. Just another hour of cleanup and he could grab dinner at Chen's noodle place down the corridor. Maybe catch the Earth football game on the feed if the signal was. The bay doors exploded inward with a deafening crash. Tyler spun around as armored figures flooded through the smoke and debris. Security forces, at least a dozen of them, weapons raised and aimed directly at him. Red targeting lasers danced across his chest. His heart hammered as his hands shot up instinctively, the rag falling from his fingers. Down on the ground. Now. The commander's voice boomed through a helmet speaker, the words repeating in 2 other alien languages Tyler barely recognized. What's going on? I didn't. A massive shape pushed through the security forces. Lord Vex. Tyler recognized the Krell merchant immediately. Those towering insectoid aliens were hard to miss, with their chitinous armor plating and mandibles that clicked when they talked. Vex was even more distinctive, draped in expensive silk wrappings that marked him as nobility among his kind. Tyler had worked on his luxury cruiser just yesterday, a simple hull panel replacement. Easy job. Good money. But the Krell wasn't here to pay a compliment. That human. Vex translator device crackled with static and rage. He destroyed my ship. Sabotage. 7 beings are dead because of his incompetence. 3 ships gone. The words hit Tyler like a physical blow. What? No. I only replaced your exterior hull panels. I never even went inside your ship. Liar. Vex's mandibles snapped together with a sound like breaking wood. Murderer. The security commander grabbed Tyler's shoulder and slammed him face-first against the workbench. Pain shot through his cheek as cold metal restraints clicked around his wrists. Evidence shows your digital signature in the navigation computer systems. Your tools were recovered at the sabotage site. You have the right to. That's impossible. Tyler struggled against the grip, but 3 security officers held him down. I'm a hull mechanic. I don't even have clearance to access NAV systems. Check the logs, check my. We have checked the logs. The commander's voice was cold, final. Your signature is all over them. Tyler's mind spun. His signature? In the navigation systems? He'd never touched them. Never even opened that part of the ship. This was insane. This was a frame job. Someone had set him up. The security team hauled him upright and started dragging him toward the shattered bay doors. His boots scraped against the floor as he tried to plant his feet, tried to make them listen. Through the growing crowd of station residents gathering to watch the spectacle, Tyler caught sight of Lisa, his assistant. She'd been in the back office doing inventory when this nightmare started. Her face was white with shock, her hands covering her mouth. Lisa. Tyler shouted over the chaos. The security cameras. Tell them about the footage. The shop recordings. A rifle butt slammed into his ribs. White-hot pain exploded through his chest and he gasped, the words dying in his throat. His knees buckled but the guards kept him moving, kept dragging him forward. Get his computers, the commander ordered. Bag everything as evidence. Tools, files, all of it. Tyler watched helplessly as his shop was torn apart. The workbench where he'd spent countless hours. The diagnostic computer he'd saved 2 years to buy. His tools, each one carefully maintained and organized. All of it being shoved into evidence containers like garbage. The crowd parted as they dragged him through. Some faces showed shock. Others showed something worse, satisfaction. Like they'd always known the human would screw up eventually. Like they'd been waiting for this. As they threw him into the back of the detention transport, Tyler's chest burned and his mind raced. 7 dead. 3 ships destroyed. They were saying he'd killed 7 beings. The penalty for that would be life in prison, maybe worse. And someone had made it look perfect. His signature in the systems. his tools at the scene. The transport doors sealed with a hiss, cutting off the station lights and the murmuring crowd. In the darkness, Tyler closed his eyes and forced himself to breathe through the pain. Someone had framed him perfectly. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated what a human would do to survive. Tyler sat in the holding cell for 3 days before they even assigned him a lawyer. 3 days of staring at gray walls, eating tasteless ration bars, and trying to figure out how his life had gone from normal to nightmare in under an hour. The cell was built for larger species, so the bench was too high and the temperature controls were set for beings that liked it 20 degrees colder than humans. He barely slept. When they finally brought him to court, the building itself seemed designed to crush hope. The Galactic Arbitration Court wasn't just big, it was massive in a way that made humans feel like insects. Columns as thick as redwood trees stretched up toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. Everything was carved from dark stone that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. The judge's bench sat 15 feet above the courtroom floor, forcing everyone to crane their necks to look up at whoever sat in judgment. Judge Tharn looked down from that bench like a king surveying peasants. The Veskari were reptilian, with scaled skin that shifted colors based on mood and eyes that didn't blink like human eyes. Ancient. Tharn's scales were a deep bronze color that probably meant something in his culture, but to Tyler it just looked hostile. When those eyes fixed on him, Tyler felt like he was already convicted. His public defender showed up 5 minutes before the trial started. Quilix was some kind of blob-like species that communicated through a translation device clipped to its gelatinous body. It had reviewed Tyler's case for maybe 20 minutes total, judging by the timestamps on the brief documents. "You should plead guilty," Quilix's translator buzzed flatly. "Negotiation possible. Maybe 5 years instead of 10. Tyler stared at the creature. "5 years? I didn't do anything. I'm innocent." "Evidence suggests otherwise." "Guilty plea shows cooperation. Judges appreciate cooperation." "I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do." Quilix made a bubbling sound that might have been a sigh. "Your choice. Unlikely outcome if you proceed." And that was it. That was his legal defense. A bored alien who clearly wanted to be anywhere else doing anything else. The trial started and Tyler realized immediately that he wasn't going to get justice. This was theater. Lord Vex took the witness stand first, his massive insectoid frame towering over the courtroom. When he spoke, his mandibles clicked and his translator amplified his voice until it boomed off the stone walls. "This human lacks the mental capacity for proper starship maintenance," Vex declared, his tone dripping with contempt. "Humans are primitive, new to space travel. This one's reckless incompetence has killed 7 innocent beings and destroyed property worth 12 million credits." The gallery murmured. Tyler tried to stand, tried to object, but Quilix pulled him back down with a pseudopod. "Not time yet," the translator buzzed. The prosecution moved like a machine. They presented maintenance logs that showed Tyler's digital signature accessing Lord Vex's navigation computer at exactly the time the sabotage occurred. They showed timestamp data, security clearance records. Then they brought in a Krell engineer who testified that humans were cognitively inferior when it came to complex starship systems, that their brains weren't evolved for the mathematics involved. Tyler's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to shout that he'd never touched those systems, that he couldn't have even accessed them with his clearance level, but every time he moved, Quilix held him down. Then came the forensic evidence. Tyler's tools, recovered from inside Lord Vex's ship near the damaged navigation computer. His DNA on the handles. His fingerprints. The prosecution laid it out piece by piece, building a case that looked absolutely airtight. When Quilix finally stood to present a defense, it lasted maybe 3 minutes. A few weak questions about procedure. A half-hearted suggestion that perhaps the evidence could be interpreted differently. Nothing about the security footage from Tyler's shop. Nothing about the fact that his clearance level shouldn't have allowed him near those systems. Nothing that actually mattered. Tyler couldn't take it anymore. He stood up. "Your Honor, I have evidence that proves." Judge Tharn's hand came down on his bench with a crack that echoed through the chamber. "Mr. Reed, you will sit down and remain silent. But I have security footage from my shop that shows. The evidence against you is conclusive and overwhelming." Tharn's scales rippled darker, angrier. "This court does not waste time on desperate lies and fabrications. You had your opportunity to present a defense. That opportunity has passed." Tyler felt his stomach drop. This was it. They weren't going to let him speak. Weren't going to look at his evidence. The trial was a formality, a show to make the execution look legal. Judge Tharn's eyes fixed on him with something that looked like satisfaction. The verdict is guilty on all charges. I hereby sentence you to 10 years of hard labor at Blackrock Penal Colony. 10 years. Tyler had heard stories about Blackrock. The atmosphere was toxic to humans, the gravity was wrong, the temperature extremes would age a person decades in just a few years. Most humans didn't survive a full sentence. It was essentially a death sentence wrapped in legal language. Guards started moving toward him from both sides. Tyler could feel the cold metal restraints coming, could feel his future being ripped away. Lisa was somewhere in the gallery, probably crying. His shop was gone. His life was gone. Unless he did something right now. Tyler's voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a knife. Your Honor. I invoke Article 47 of the Galactic Commerce Code. The entire courtroom went silent. Every alien species, every translator, every guard froze. Even Judge Tharn's scales stopped rippling. Tyler stood there, heart pounding, and waited. Judge Tharn's eyes narrowed into thin slits. For a long moment, he just stared at Tyler like he was an insect that had dared to speak out of turn. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold as ice. Article 47 of the Galactic Commerce Code applies to trade disputes and contract disagreements, Mr. Reed. Not criminal proceedings. You're wasting this court's time. Tyler's heart hammered in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. He'd spent 3 days in that freezing cell memorizing every word of the statute. Article 47, Section 12, Your Honor. Any licensed commercial operator accused of professional negligence has the right to present authenticated business documentation in their defense, regardless of prior evidentiary limitations or rulings. My repair shop is registered as a commercial operation under the Galactic Commerce Code. I have authenticated recordings that prove my innocence. The murmuring in the courtroom grew louder. Several court clerks immediately pulled out their data pads, fingers flying across screens as they searched for the exact wording of the law. Lord Vex shifted in his seat, his mandibles clicking together rapidly, a nervous tick Tyler had noticed when working on his ship. Judge Tharn's claws scraped against the wooden bench, leaving deep grooves. This is highly irregular. It's the law, Your Honor. Tyler kept his eyes locked on the judge. Section 12 specifically covers cases where commercial operators are accused of negligence in their professional capacity. That's exactly what this case is about. One of the clerks, a small insectoid creature with antennae that twitched nervously, scurried up to the judge's bench. It chirped something in its native language, then held up its datapad for Tharn to read. Tyler watched the judge's scales shift from bronze to a darker, angrier shade of red. The law was clear. Tyler was right. And Judge Tharn knew it. Denying him now would create immediate grounds for appeal. The entire trial would be thrown out, and Tharn would look either incompetent or corrupt in front of the entire galactic legal community. The courtroom was packed with journalists from a dozen different species. This case was already high profile because of Lord Vex's status. Any hint of impropriety would destroy the judge's reputation. Tharn's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then he spoke through what sounded like clenched teeth. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Reed? No more. And if this is another waste of time, it won't be, Your Honor. I promise you that. Tyler reached into his orange prison jumpsuit, into the small inner pocket near his chest. The guards had searched him when they arrested him, but they'd been looking for weapons, not something as small and harmless looking as what he pulled out now. A data crystal, no bigger than his thumbnail, clear with a faint blue glow in its center. He held it up for the courtroom to see. Humans have a saying, Your Honor. Document everything. We learned that lesson the hard way, through centuries of our own legal battles and injustices. When you can't always rely on people believing you, you learn to keep records. Tyler walked to the center of the courtroom and handed the crystal to the court technician, a floating jellyfish-like being that operated the holographic display systems. This contains the complete security feed from my repair shop. Multiple camera angles covering every bay and entrance. The footage is cryptographically sealed by Vortex Station's central authority, time-stamped at the moment of recording. It's tamper-proof. Any attempt to alter the footage breaks the seal, and you can verify the seal's integrity right now. The technician inserted the crystal into the display system. Lines of code scrolled across a secondary screen, showing the verification process. After a moment it spoke through its translator. Seal is intact. Authentication confirmed. Timestamp verification confirmed. Tyler glanced back at Lord Vex. The Krell merchant prince had gone very still. His mandibles had stopped clicking. That was interesting. Play timestamp 1400 hours, Tyler said clearly. That's when Lord Vex's ship was in my bay. The massive holographic display in the center of the courtroom flickered to life. The image was crystal clear, shot from multiple angles that covered every inch of Tyler's repair bay. There he was in his work clothes, moving around Lord Vex's luxury cruiser. The timestamp in the corner showed 14 hours and counted forward. The courtroom watched as holographic Tyler worked on the ship's exterior hull panels. He removed the damaged plating, installed new sections, welded the seams, tested the seal integrity. Every movement was visible. Every tool he used, and most importantly where he worked. Never once did he enter the ship. Never once did he go near the access hatches that would lead to internal systems. He worked entirely on the exterior hull, exactly as the work order specified. The timestamp showed him finishing at 1547. He cleaned up his tools, ran a final diagnostic scan on the hull integrity, and then closed the bay doors as the ship powered up and left. Professional. Exactly what he'd been hired to do. Now, Tyler said, his voice cutting through the absolute silence in the courtroom, jumped to 2,100 hours. That's 9 p.m. after I closed my shop for the night. The technician adjusted the footage. The timestamp skipped forward. The shop was dark now, lit only by emergency lighting strips along the floor. The bays were empty. Tyler had gone home for the night. For a long moment nothing happened. Just an empty shop in the darkness. Then one of the side doors opened. Not the main entrance. The maintenance access door that required a security override code. Someone had bypassed the lock. A figure stepped into the shop, moving carefully, looking around to make sure no one was there. The figure wore clothing marked with Lord Vex's house insignia, the same symbols that marked him as Krell nobility. The courtroom erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Tyler just smiled. Keep watching. It gets better. The Krell technician moved through Tyler's shop with clear purpose. This wasn't someone stumbling around in the dark, confused or lost. Every movement was calculated, practiced. He knew exactly where he was going and exactly what he needed to do. The holographic footage showed him heading straight to Tyler's tool storage. He opened the cabinets without hesitation, grabbed specific tools, a plasma welder, a circuit analyzer, a data port connector, and carried them toward the corner of the shop where Lord Vex's luxury cruiser had been parked earlier that day. Tyler watched the courtroom as every eye fixed on the display. Notice how he knows exactly which tools to take, he said quietly. He's not searching. He's not guessing. Someone told him exactly what to grab. The technician placed Tyler's tools on the floor near an access panel, arranging them carefully. Then he pulled out a small device from his own toolkit, something that glowed with soft blue light. He attached it to the access panel and began working. That's a security bypass module, Tyler explained, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Military grade. Not something a civilian technician would have. Watch what he does next. The technician opened the access panel and climbed partially inside the ship. For the next several minutes, the footage showed him working on something deep in the vessel's systems. His movements were efficient, professional. This wasn't vandalism or random destruction. This was someone who knew exactly what he was doing. He's accessing the navigation computer, Tyler continued. And right now he's forging my digital signature. Creating false maintenance logs that make it look like I was the one working on these systems. The timestamp will show it happened during my shift, using my security credentials. A clerk near the front row gasped. Others leaned forward, completely absorbed in what they were seeing. The technician pulled back slightly, adjusting his position, and the camera angle shifted to show his hands more clearly. He was deliberately damaging specific components inside the navigation system. Not ripping things apart but carefully, methodically breaking exact pieces in exact ways. Look at that, Tyler said, and he couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice now. That's not incompetent maintenance. That's surgical sabotage. He's damaging the backup redundancy systems first, then the primary navigation relay, then the safety cutoffs. It's designed to fail catastrophically, but only after several hours of flight. Long enough that the ship would be far from the station when it happened. The technician finished his work, backed out of the access panel and closed it carefully. He wiped down the surfaces he'd touched, then took Tyler's tools and placed them strategically around the area, some inside the access panel itself, making sure they'd be found during any investigation. And now he's planting my tools at the crime scene, Tyler said. Making absolutely certain that forensics would find them and connect them to me. The courtroom was dead silent except for Tyler's narration. Even Judge Tharn had leaned forward, his scales shifting through colors Tyler didn't recognize. Jump forward to 2315, Tyler said. 11:15 p.m. The timestamp blurred forward. The shop remained dark and empty for the fast-forwarded minutes. Then, at exactly 23 hours and 15 minutes, the side door opened again. Lord Vex himself entered. The massive Krell merchant prince had to duck slightly to fit through the human-sized door. He moved across the shop floor to where his technician waited. Even without audio, even through the grainy quality of night cycle security footage, the body language was impossible to misinterpret. Lord Vex inspected the technician's work, leaning down to look at the planted tools at the closed access panel. The technician gestured, explaining something. Vex's mandibles clicked in what looked like approval. Then Vex reached into his silk wrappings and pulled out something small that caught the emergency lighting. Something that glittered. He handed it to the technician, who took it with what looked like a bow of respect. Payment. Right there on camera. Lord Vex paying his technician for a job well done. The courtroom exploded. Voices shouted in a dozen different languages, translators screeching over each other. Lord Vex shot to his feet, his massive frame towering over everyone around him. His mandibles clacked together furiously, so fast they were almost a blur. Lies. His translator crackled at maximum volume. Digital fabrication. This footage is falsified. I demand. The crystal bears a cryptographic seal from Vortex Station Central Authority. Tyler's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. He wasn't shouting, but somehow his words carried. Generated and certified at the exact moment of recording. Any alteration to the footage, any tampering at all, breaks that seal automatically. He pointed at the technician's display screen where verification data scrolled past. As you can clearly see, the seal is intact. Unbroken. This footage is completely authentic under Galactic Evidence Standard Article 19. Every court in known space recognizes these seals as legitimate proof. Judge Tharn stared at the display, then at Lord Vex, then back at the display. His scales had gone almost white, a color Tyler had never seen on a Veskari before. The implications were crashing down on him like an avalanche. Lord Vex, Tharn's voice was barely controlled rage now. You will remain in this courtroom for immediate questioning. Guards, detain him now. You have no authority over a Krell noble. Vex translator shrieked. I am protected by diplomatic. I have every authority in this courtroom. Judge Tharn slammed both fists on his bench and the crack echoed like thunder. You have deceived this court. You have committed perjury. You have orchestrated murder. Your diplomatic status is revoked pending investigation. Security forces swarmed Lord Vex from all sides. Even with his size and strength, there were too many of them. Restraints designed for large species clicked around his limbs as he struggled and screamed protests. More guards grabbed the technician from the witness gallery where he'd been sitting, watching his carefully planned crime unravel in real time. The interrogation happened right there in the courtroom, with Tyler still standing at the center of it all. Under pressure, with the evidence undeniable, the truth spilled out piece by piece. The 3 ships that were destroyed belonged to rival merchants. They'd been undercutting Lord Vex's trade routes, offering cheaper transport, stealing his clients. Vex had planned the entire operation. Murder them, collect massive insurance payouts, and eliminate his competition in one move. But he'd needed someone to blame. Someone the courts wouldn't believe. Someone expendable. He'd chosen Tyler specifically because he was human. Still new to the galactic community. Still seen by some species as primitive, inferior. Easy to frame. Easy to condemn. And it had almost worked. Judge Tharn descended from his high bench. In all his years practicing law, Tyler had never heard of a Veskari judge leaving his position of authority during a trial. But Tharn walked down the steps slowly, his robes dragging behind him, until he stood directly in front of Tyler. The judge reached out with his clawed hands and removed Tyler's restraints himself. The metal cuffs clicked open and fell away. In Veskari culture, Tyler would later learn, this was one of the highest gestures of personal apology possible. It meant the judge took full responsibility for the injustice. The court. Tharn's voice was quiet now, stripped of its earlier authority. The court apologizes. Your conviction is vacated immediately. All charges dismissed. You are a free man, Mr. Reed. Tyler rubbed his wrists where the restraints had been. He should have felt relief, joy, victory. But instead he felt something else burning in his chest. Something that needed to be said. Thank you, Your Honor. Tyler stepped forward, not backing down, not looking away. But I need to say something. Not just to you but to everyone here. He turned slowly, taking in the packed courtroom. Every seat filled. Beings from dozens of species watching. And in the back he could see the camera drones hovering, their lenses recording everything, broadcasting this trial across the entire sector. Your Honor, with all due respect, you nearly sent an innocent person to die today. Tyler's voice was steady, clear. Not because the evidence was overwhelming, but because you assumed I was too primitive to deserve a real hearing. You dismissed my evidence before even looking at it. You decided I was guilty the moment you saw I was human. Judge Tharn's scales rippled, but he didn't interrupt. The system worked today, Tyler continued, but only because I knew your laws better than you expected a human to know them. Only because I spent 3 days in a freezing cell memorizing legal codes instead of giving up. What happens to the next human who doesn't know Article 47? What happens to them? The courtroom was absolutely silent. Not a whisper. Not a movement. Even the translator devices seemed to be holding their breath. Tyler's voice grew stronger. Humans spent centuries fighting our own prejudices. We segregated people by skin color. We enslaved each other. We committed genocides. We made terrible, unforgivable mistakes. But we learned something from all that blood and pain. We learned that justice without evidence is just revenge wearing a fancy robe. He could see some species in the gallery shifting uncomfortably. They should be uncomfortable. Maybe we're newcomers to your galactic community, Tyler said. Maybe our ships aren't as fast, our technology isn't as advanced. But we brought something valuable with us. A lesson paid for with millions of lives throughout our history. Trust but verify. Evidence over assumptions. Every being, regardless of species, deserves a fair trial. Not theater. Not a predetermined outcome. Justice. Tyler turned to face the camera drones directly, looking into those lenses, knowing that millions of beings across dozens of worlds were watching right now. And here's a free piece of human wisdom for anyone watching. Always keep backups. The courtroom remained frozen for one more heartbeat. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Within seconds, half the gallery was applauding, the sound building like thunder. Judge Tharn bowed his head slightly, accepting the rebuke he deserved. The legal proceedings moved quickly after that. Lord Vex and his technician were formally charged with 7 counts of murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, perjury, and evidence tampering. The trial took less than a week with the video evidence so clear. The combined sentence was 40 years in a maximum security facility, and this time, there would be no diplomatic immunity, no special treatment. But something bigger was happening. Tyler's speech had been broadcast across the sector. Legal scholars started analyzing the case. Law schools began teaching it as an example of systematic bias. Dozens of judicial systems started reviewing their procedures for handling cross-species cases. Tyler's testimony was entered into the official legal curriculum on 17 different worlds. Students studying interspecies law now watched footage of a human mechanic standing up to a corrupt judge and winning through knowledge, preparation, and sheer stubborn courage. When Tyler returned to Vortex Station, he expected his shop to be gone, his equipment sold off, his reputation destroyed. Instead, he found a line of clients stretching around the corridor. Ships from species he'd never even met before, waiting for repairs. Word had spread fast. The human who couldn't be framed. The mechanic who kept records of everything. The guy who knew the law better than judges. Lisa had managed to keep the business alive during his arrest, bless her. She'd refused to let station authorities auction off his equipment, citing about 15 different regulations they were violating. She'd learned from the best. Together they expanded. 3 repair bays became 5. They hired 2 more mechanics. 1 human, 1 from a species called the Torvani who had faced similar discrimination. Tyler commissioned a new sign for above the shop entrance. It was translated into 40 different languages and it said something simple: quality work. Fair prices. Every transaction recorded. That last part wasn't a joke. Every job was now documented from 6 different camera angles, every transaction logged, every client conversation saved. Not because Tyler didn't trust people, but because he'd learned what it meant to be vulnerable in a system that didn't always protect you. Some of the station's older residents called him paranoid. Tyler called it professional. On quiet nights, when the station shifted to sleep cycle and the bays were empty, Tyler would sometimes stand in his shop and think about how close he'd come to losing everything. How close he'd come to dying in a prison colony for a crime he didn't commit. The best weapon he'd learned wasn't strength or advanced technology or political power. Sometimes the best weapon was simply being too smart to frame and too stubborn to give up. Justice wasn't about who shouted the loudest or stood the tallest or belonged to the most powerful species. Justice was about evidence. Documentation. Truth. Justice was about keeping the receipts. And Tyler Reed, human mechanic, had just taught the galaxy that lesson the hard way.